Welcome to my sewing room. We have such an exciting show for you today, and the reason I'm standing over on this side of the sewing room by the quilt is because the main theme of this show today will be to share with you how to construct this beautiful quilt which you've seen throughout the last 26 shows of Martha's Sewing Room. I named this quilt the Blue Danube quilt for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think it is so beautiful, and it has the prettiest shades of blues and ecrudes and tiny other touches of pastels. But it was so pretty, and I just thought it looked like a waltz. So since I loved the color blue and I thought it looked like a waltz, I said, let's just name this the Blue Danube quilt. So in just a few minutes, we're going to share with you how easy it is to put together this perfectly gorgeous heirloom quilt. Okay, let's put together the quilt. Constructing this quilt is really very easy, and it has a unique construction. Let me share with you what I'm talking about. This square is blue. The primary color is blue. If you'll move over and look at this square, its primary base fabric is ecru. Now, this is very interesting. The sashing on all 9 of these squares goes around one square. For instance, the blue square has the ecru sashing, which goes all the way around it in ecru. Now the base fabric of this square is ecru. So it has blue sashing that goes all the way around it, and then onto that side, and then onto the next row. I have as my guest today my very dear friend and business colleague, Louise Bayard. Louise is Executive Director of the Martha Pullen School of Art Fashion. She also designs and constructs many of the clothes and the quilts and just about everything for all of the Martha Pullen publications. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. Like Martha said, this is the construction of this quilt is a little bit different in that the sashing is only around the blocks instead of around the whole pieces like it usually is. To start with, for each block, it was mainly either ecru or blue, and on this one, since it's ecru, I have blue sashing that was stitched at the top and the bottom. Once you stitch with that 1/4 inch seam allowance, then you need to press the seams open. And here is a blue square with the ecru sashing, and you can see how it's just going to be pressed open. Once you have the sashing pressed open on both the top and the bottom, then you want to add the sashing on the side. So this was stitched this way, and then it was pressed open. And there's a blue and an ecru square here. Okay, after you have all of these squares done, then you need to put them together. And one of the things that I wanted to show when you're stitching rows together like this is, you want to make sure that you match your seams exactly. And to do that, if you can have one seam going one way and the other seam going the other way, and make sure that it matches perfectly, you can put a pin through it so that as you come to this seam, stitch to the pin, take the pin out, and then continue stitching. Generally, you don't want to stitch over the pins.
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, now this is just another little piece here that is stitched in panels, and this one is ready to stitch, and this would complete my quilt top. Most of the time, you can use either a regular foot when you're doing this, as long as you do a 1/4 inch seam. A lot of the sewing machines today do have special feet. Like this is a 1/4 inch foot. You would put this blade right along the edge of your fabric and stitch, and it gives you a perfect 1/4 inch all the time. And most of the time when you're doing quilting, it is important to do that perfect 1/4 inch. Okay, now this is a little play quilt here to simulate the big quilt, in that the squares are the same. Of course, there's not any decorations or anything in here, but I just wanted to be able to show you the layering. And I've already used the temporary spray adhesive to kind of glue things together, but I've got a backing, then I've got a batting, and then a lining, and then the quilt top. When I put all the layers together, I do usually use a temporary spray adhesive, but since this is simulating a larger quilt, I did add safety pins. And you want to add safety pins, especially if it's a larger quilt. The temporary spray adhesive works great to hold your layers together and get it going, but I still prefer using some pins or some type of basting. In doing the quilting for this quilt, the quilting was done by stitching in the ditch, and that's the seam that is between the two colors. To do the stitching in the ditch, you can use a straight stitch foot, and this is the straight stitch foot for this machine. It has one little hole in it, and it does help you to guide it or see exactly where you want to stitch. Another foot that you can use is called a walking foot, and this foot is made so that the arm here fits over the needle bar, and can you see how the foot itself is going up and down? It's called an even feed or walking foot, so that it actually grasps the fabric and pulls it through with each stitch. A lot of times in regular sewing, with a regular foot rather, as you sew, the foot kind of pushes that top layer out of the way, and that's why at the end of a seam you frequently have two different lengths of seam. You know, it looks like it's different when you actually do the sewing. So that's basically all you need to do to the quilt. And of course, in the design you do have some other quilting design that can be done either free motion or with the foot on.
You mean following around the designs? Like I noticed on some of the quilts, there's just a pretty quilting that goes right around the line that was done there.
Right.
Louise, thank you so very much.
You're so welcome.
And now I have a doll dress for you. This beautiful doll dress is so spectacular. I would just like to take a minute to really look at it. Now, on an earlier show, I showed you how to make this little collar. But you know what we've done here? Taken English netting and made our own lace. You can see the little circle of pink and green flowers and this beautiful scallop on the bottom. I think these sleeves are especially pretty with the little scalloped double needle pintucks all the way around each sleeve. And then there's Swiss entredeux at the bottom of the sleeve, purchased ribbon, more Swiss entredeux, and once again we've taken the English cotton netting and made our own lace. Now this has a really sweet little sash which is built into the dress, and by the way, the dress is made out of pink Swiss Nylona, which is one of my favorite fabrics for all time heirloom sewing. And if you look down, this dress really has 3 fancy bands, and I'll show you what I mean. The first fancy band has entredeux, antique ecru French lace, wonderful purchased ribbon, and more antique ecru French lace. It has more Swiss entredeux. Now that's the first part of the fancy band. This is the second part of the fancy band. It has these scalloped double needle pintucks on the Swiss Nylona, and the third part of the fancy band has a Swiss entredeux and this fabulous lace that's once again been made on the netting, and you can see the machine embroidery and the pretty little scallop that comes around in a decorative stitch done in ecru. Now we're going to look again about how you make your own lace, and it doesn't have to be just on a doll dress. You can make your own lace with your sewing machine. It's really very easy. Now I have here a piece of cotton netting. This is English cotton netting, and you can use a polyester cotton netting, but I think it's really nicer to have a little bit of the English netting. I'm going to use a little bit of temporary spray adhesive on the netting, and then I'm going to put a water-soluble stabilizer right on top. Actually, I put a piece on the bottom also on this just to make it a little bit stiffer. So I have a double row of water-soluble stabilizer, one on the top and one on the bottom, and that little temporary spray adhesive is going to hold it together. Now you can see here I have started out by making my lace. I have done first of all the scallop. That's the bottom of this pretty piece of lace. Now since I want to embellish it a little bit more, I will once again with my machine come in and do a really pretty machine decorative stitch. And with today's sewing machines, the sky is the limit on these beautiful stitches that you can make. After I get all of this done, the stitching done, I will simply come in and trim on the bottom of the scallop, and as you can see, I have the start of a beautiful piece of lace. Okay, now the other parts of the fancy band are very interesting too. We have entredeux, and in order to connect this entredeux to this lace, I'm going to trim away the seam allowance. Now then, this is what I want to talk about and want to show you a little bit. To stitch really, really lightweight French lace to a much heavier purchased ribbon, well, you can sometimes do it just with your regular zigzag on your sewing machine, but they're two different weights entirely. So let me show you just a little trick. I like to stitch a heavy ribbon to a very lightweight French lace by putting water-soluble stabilizer underneath it. It really does help me to get it, to give a little bit of stability to sew, and it means that one of them isn't going to creep and crawl up more than the other one. It does help hold it straight, and of course when I have my water-soluble stabilizer under here, I'll take my shish kebab stick and put it together. So I am just zigzagging the heavy ribbon together with the lightweight lace, and it always gives me a nice straight join, even though these two fabrics, well, one's a fabric and one is a ribbon, are very, very different in weight. I think it just adds just a little bit of help and making them go through nice and smooth. And then of course all you do to get rid of the water-soluble stabilizer is just simply dip it in water and it goes away. Now after I join all of these together, I'm going to put, using the technique of entredeux to straight fabric, I will join the entredeux to this wonderful third part of the fancy band, which has the double needle scallops. Aren't those pretty? You just use a scallop setting on your sewing machine and use your double needles. Now the last part is to attach the lace that I have just made, this beautiful lace made on the netting. And remember people, you can do any kind, as long as you put that water-soluble stabilizer, maybe even 2 rows on it, and I use that the temporary spray adhesive to stick it all together. You can put any amount of machine embroidery on this, and then you're going to go ahead and attach your entredeux to your lace, and then I'll attach the entredeux using entredeux to flat fabric technique to my double needle scalloped pintucks, and then I have a perfectly exquisite fancy band to go on this doll dress. Would you go with me just 1 minute back over to this doll dress? You can see the lace that's made here and the lace that is made on the bottom, and actually the lace that's made on the sleeves, and every bit of that was made without any lace expenditure or money spent on lace. And now go get the kids, bring them to the television set, because we have a special segment called So Cool for Kids. I am so happy to have as my guest today my daughter Joanna. Joanna, these are the cutest little vests that you're going to show them how to make today. Now tell me a little bit about this one.
And they're so easy. This is just a little vest, a polar fleece vest for your 18-inch baby doll.
And then this
and
one.
that one's made out of suede. So actually you can make it out of any material that you want. But today I'm going to show you one made out of the polar fleece. First, all you do is cut out your pattern, and when you cut out your pattern, kids, I want you to use your pinking shears. And you can see that the side of the vest is with the straight scissors. You can either do that or you can just go ahead and cut the whole pattern out with these pinking shears. After the pattern is cut out, I want you to simply just do a straight stitch, 1/4 inch from the edge, let me use my little thing, all the way around, like you see
Stay stitching.
with this one. Right, stay stitching all the way around, and you repeat the step, remember 1/4 inch all the way around, and then you see this back one, it's 1/4 inch around the arms, neck, arms, and around the bottom. After you have sewn your straight stitch, you are just going to simply put it back together. And all we're going to do is sew 1/4 inch from the end, one shoulder and the next shoulder, and then on the sides 1/4 inch from the edge, and then I'm going to go ahead and sew 1/4 inch from an edge on this side.
What I love about polar fleece is that no edges have to be finished.
That's right. Take out your pin always. All the way down. And after your shoulder seams are sewn, the sides are sewn. Here, let me go ahead and get the strings off. How you do. Let's flip it over, just like that. And there you have it. It's a little vest for your doll.
That is, turn it right side out and you're ready to go.
You're ready to go.
And the fun thing is that a child of all ages, our kids can really make these
Right.
clothes. And you know what is so fun too? That little hat. Put that little hat down there. Well, it doesn't. Well, I guess you could wear purple and yellow together. But the little polar fleece hat is so adorable to wear with the polar fleece vest.
It is.
Joanna, thank you so much for being here to share our Sewing for Kids segment called So Cool for Kids. And next, we have for you a home decorating project. I have two wonderful projects for you. I first saw this napkin holder years ago when Joe and I were on a trip to France. I went by the window of this lovely little linen shop and saw this wonderful napkin holder that had napkins, and it has this little holder to go out on top of it. And I thought, oh, that is so fun. If you have napkins on a picnic table or out on the patio, the napkins won't blow away. Now watch. It's even more fun than that. It's easy to make. Look, it's just a flat piece of fabric. Let me untie the whole thing so you can get the whole idea here. It's a flat piece of quilted fabric, and it has another little piece of quilted fabric sewn on one edge, and then you fold it down and simply tie it up. These are just little bias bindings that you tie with, bias bindings around the holder and bias bindings around the base of the holder. And then we just thought it would be fun to make a pot holder to go with it, because I think that's just really pretty. So you have a pot holder with a nice place to slip your hand in, and these are some fun projects for you to make, and not nearly as expensive as those I saw in France, I can assure you. The little pot holder is very simple to do. You simply have a base fabric, your fusible batting, and a lining fabric, and then you have your little pocket that you're going to put your hand in. First of all, we're going to make our bias binding and stitch it down on the pocket part. And you've got to have a little holder here. You know, all pot holders have to have a little holder to put it up on a little hanger in the kitchen or wherever else you want to hang it. And then you have your reasonably wide bias binding, which we will slip right. By the way, you have to sew this before you put it together. We will slip the bias binding over the whole thing and stitch it down, and that is all there is to making a nice thick pot holder to go with your little napkin holder. Now the napkin holder is very easy to make. First of all, you have to make some narrow little bias pieces and stitch them down after you fold them over. Those are going to go in each corner, 2 in each corner, because you remember after we bind it up, that's how you're going to pull it up and make your little napkin holder. Okay, the next trick is to put your bias binding along 3 sides, not just one, but along 3 sides of this little piece in the middle, which will come down later to hold your napkins so they won't fly out. And then around the whole thing, we will have to have a reasonably wide bias tape, as I have here, that will go all the way around the whole thing. In just a minute. Now, here's what I would like to share with you today, and there are 2 tricks to making bias binding. I have a bias binding maker here, one of the bigger ones. And bias binding is really easy to make. You cut a piece of bias, you get one of these bias makers, and you slip the iron along right behind it. I have a nice hot iron here. And you've made your bias. Now let me just show you another trick. Some people say that it is easier to turn it over and to press and let the bias go this way. I'll have to be sure my little bias binder is not too hot before I grab onto it. Some people say it is easier and makes a nicer bias if you pull it this way. Now you know what my suggestion would be? You try it both ways and see which way you like the best, because that purely, like nearly everything else in sewing, is personal preference. So with one of these wonderful bias tape makers, you can make all the bias tape that you want to. And then, kind of hot here, when you get ready to put it on your, I'll just go ahead and pull the rest of that off. When you get ready to put it around your pot holder, you'll simply fold it in half and, of course, press it again, because you want it to be nice and flat and nice and smooth when you get ready to make your, and by the way, you might ought to try that both ways. There is just some kind of little controversy which goes on. Some people like to do it one way, and some people like to do it the other. Now let me bring this cute little napkin holder back up here. That is how easy it is to make a wonderful gift and to make this adorable little napkin holder. And after the whole thing is finished, I'll go back in, tie up my corners, and you have a wonderful gift. And you know what? If you're so fortunate as to have a machine which embroiders, I would certainly put a machine embroidery here, or else put someone's name, maybe happy anniversary, happy birthday, happy Mother's Day, and put the year. And that would really make it a special present. And you also could do the same machine embroidery or the occasion on your pot holder too. Now won't you come along with me to my attic? This is one of the most beautiful dresses I have ever seen in my life, and I'd like to share some of the details with you. I bought the dress in Massachusetts, by the way. It has bows, and you know bows are one of my favorite things to do with lace. Isn't that pretty how the bow is on this side of the bodice? And look at all of the hand embroidery that is in the middle. And then there's another bow built in with French lace on the other side of the bodice. The sleeves have this absolutely wonderful hand embroidery that goes down the sleeves, and then beautiful lace insertion and edging. Then as we come on down the dress, we see more beautiful hand embroidery and then some pretty, pretty hand crochet. Starting down the skirt of the dress, the embroidery is absolutely almost not able to be described. It is so beautiful. Let me pick up the skirt and just show you the gorgeous bows on the bottom of the skirt. Actually, each one of these bows has a little bit of lace that has just been gathered inside the bow. Isn't that wonderful? Well, if you think the front is pretty, just wait until I show you the back. Just as pretty as the front. You see the wonderful embroidery and more bows on each side. Beautiful embroidery as well, beautifully done on the back as the front. The back has more beautiful panels. I'd like for you just to take a minute to look at that embroidery. And you know the wonderful thing, if you are so fortunate as to own an embroidery machine, one of today's wonderful machines which does all this kind of embroidery, you can create something like this very easily. It does take time. Even with an embroidery machine, it takes time. But you can create something like this really very easily on your own sewing machine. Let me pull this over and show you the bow on the other side. Okay, kind of wadded it up a little. Isn't that pretty? The hand embroidery comes down and just touches base with the bow. For our Sewing from the Heart today, I have a letter from Yvonne Fairfax Jones from Queensland, Australia. And Yvonne writes, "Hello, Martha. I would like to let you know of the heart stitching of my group, Company of Angels. One weekend each year, 20 weekends in all, 20 people in all, spend a 24-hour period, 7 a.m. Saturday to 7 p.m. Sunday, and make a full bed-size quilt. We do this in 2 shifts, with all of the night girls cutting and doing the machine sewing, and the day girls, and those are those of us that can't keep our eyes open past 9 p.m., do the applique and the other hand sewing. We then raffle the quilt over several months and donate the money raised to a cause agreed on by the whole group. Last year we assisted the program called Writing for the Disabled, and this year we will donate funds to our 5 local Paralympians, such heroes to all of us." Yvonne Fairfax Jones from Queensland, Australia. Yvonne, thank you so much for sharing your story about what your group, the Company of Angels, does each year. All over the world, Yvonne, from Australia to America to many, many other countries, women who love to sew are indeed spending their time and their money to raise money for those less fortunate. Thank you so much for visiting with me in my sewing room today. I've had a wonderful time, and I hope you have too. Won't you come back next time?